ate noodles with no packet. Cereal.
Professor Jiang, take us to school.
So now let's talk about how the US dollar conquers the world. So for the longest time, this system works well. Okay, the United States is in competition with the Soviet Union. But over time, the Americans start to abuse this system. So they pay for things they can't really pay for. For example, the war in Vietnam. For example, a space race. For example, something called Great Society. Okay, they're just spending too much money. Now the countries start to freak.
Right. So you're wondering, okay, how did the Americans are able to spend so much money? It's because when Nixon took them off of the gold standard in 1971, it allowed the Americans to spend and print as much money as they wanted without any sort of regulation, okay? Which is what caused them to now be in the what is over $40 trillion in debt, okay? Because you need money to do all these things. People have to be paid to do all these things. So if you can just print money and you take yourself off the gold standard, you have essentially you have to have enough money in circulation as there is in gold in your reserve. So once you remove that, it allows you to then inflate the amount of money that you're able to print, right? So that's why they say money's not real. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. So France basically withdraws all its gold from the United States. So in 1971, what Nixon does is say, you know what? Here's the secret, guys. We actually don't have enough gold to pay off everyone, okay? So screw this. We're not going to peg the dollar to gold anymore. Okay, do you understand? You can now no longer redeem your US dollars for gold. It's done, okay? So now what happens is the US dollar becomes a Ponzi scheme, all right? What is a Ponzi scheme? A Ponzi scheme is basically the US dollar is valuable because people want to use it. You understand? There's no value in itself. It's only valuable because people want to use it. So now Nixon has to go and create demand for the US dollar, right? So the first thing he does is he goes to Saudi Arabia and he creates something called a petrodollar. The idea of the petrodollar is very simple. Saudi Arabia, which is the largest oil exporter in the world, will only accept payment in US dollars. Therefore, if you want oil, you have to have US dollars, okay? That's the first thing that Nixon does. The second thing that Nixon does is actually even more important. What does he do? You guys know? He visits China. Okay? Not only does he visit China, but he's established a framework in which America will give China everything, okay? In the 1980s, what happens? America gives China its market access. Now,
yeah, which is why all the like he's about to say, right? All the US consumer goods went from being manufactured in America to being manufactured in China, which is what then begins the degrade and downfall of American goods, right? And also you're outsourcing a lot of work, right? Instead of things being made in America, they now are made in China, which is things like Xueqin bikes, food products, they're all made in-house, they're all made in America. And then now you put all the manufacturing and plants all the way in China, dude. The Chinese obviously, sure, the labor is cheaper, but so is the quality of the goods, man. It's not, this is why they say things aren't like they used to be, right?
US consumers can buy goods from China. That's a huge deal, guys, okay? Number one. Number two is America gives China FDI, technology, education, all right? Imagine what happens. America gives foreign investment to China, gives all this capital to China, gives all this technology to China, right? All these military secrets that America has, it gives China for free. And not only that, but America educates the Chinese elite. In the 1980s, all these Chinese students for school go to America to learn American technology, okay? And the third thing, this is the most important, is military protection. All these conflicts that China has with Southeast Asia, with Japan, Vietnam, America will now protect China. When Chinese ships export goods to Europe, Africa, and the United States, the US Navy will now protect these Chinese ships. Can you understand? You're like, oh my God, America gave China everything. America made China rich. Why would America do that? And then one answer, and only one answer. It's to make China use US dollars, okay? It's that simple. So now when...
Interesting. Force them to use the US dollar. Because the more countries they can get to use their dollar, the more, I guess, valuable the dollar became, right? Because that's why you have most of these countries, their reserve currency is the US dollar. But as of late, a lot of these countries that were using the US as a reserve dollar are removing themselves from using their dollar. Because then it devalues the American dollar if no one has it in their reserve currency, right? As opposed to people holding gold, they say, no, hold the US dollar. But now one said, no, fuck that, dude. We're not doing that. Which is why America is panicking, bro. Which is why the collapse of the West is happening right in front of us.
China trades with the world, it gets US dollars in return. There's that. Okay? And the entire idea is to make the world addicted to US dollars. And now that the world is addicted to US dollars, now that the world depends on US dollars, America can now control the global economy, okay? So in 1991, the Soviet Union collapses. And now America is the only game in town. There's no one who can challenge the supremacy of the Americans. And so now what happens is America creates something called the New World Order. The New World Order is based on global trade. But because the United States controls the US dollar, it can now control something called pricing. Pricing just means that the Americans can decide the value of everything, okay? So what America does is create a price hierarchy. So at the very bottom are resources. Above that is manufacturing, then there's knowledge, and then finance. This is the price hierarchy for the world, all right? It divides the world into a division of labor. Okay, so what is resources? Well, guys, it's Russia. Does that make sense? Russia, Africa, South America. What's manufacturing? China. What's knowledge? Europe. What is finance? America. Okay, does that make sense? So what's going to happen is America is going to take its manufacturing and transfer to China because it's cheaper for China to do it than for America to do it. And all America is going to do is finance. Okay? What is finance? Finance is just the creation of money for the purpose of creating more money. So this is the system in place. And at first, it sounds great because everyone's making money, okay? But there are inherent instability in this system. Okay? And we will discuss all this instability throughout the semester. But for the sake of simplicity, let's talk about America. What happens when you focus on finance is that you become a speculative economy. You focus on gambling, okay? Basically gambling. And this leads to something called the 2008 Great Financial Crisis when the American economy collapsed, okay?
Exactly. And I don't know if he's going to go into it, but the result of the 2008 crisis was based because of all the banks were giving away loans to people that essentially couldn't afford them. They're letting poor people have loans, and essentially the market got overextended and then it collapsed, right? It created a bubble. They were giving away what they call subprime mortgages, subprime loans to poor people. Essentially, it's a way to say subprime, something that is prime. If we're looking at things like Optimus Prime is number one, right? Somebody who is subprime with somebody who is like sub-level or subordinate to Optimus Prime. I'm using Optimus Prime as a prime reference, essentially, right? So this allowed poor people and people that clearly they not have the means to pay these things back to just have these loans, right? Because then that puts more money in people, in these banks' pockets and investors' pockets, because they'll make a shit ton of money through interest, okay?
And at this time, the entire world economy should have collapsed. And so what happened was all these central banks from around the world came together in Basel, Switzerland, the Bank of International Settlements, okay? Right? The secretive body in which all economic policies are made. And they decide the only way to save the world is if China spends money. You understand? Why do we have all these skyscrapers? Why are there all these airports? Why are all these high-speed railways? Because China, to save the global economy, decided to invest in infrastructure, okay?
Right. And so China decided to invest in infrastructure, but China also did one other thing that was super intelligent. They didn't just build in their own country. They decided to start building and developing other countries. If you look at a lot of countries in Africa, the Chinese are everywhere. They're building bridges. They're getting all these African countries to take loans out with China so then China can help them create and build infrastructure like roads and different sort of sewage systems. And this allows China then to essentially do the same thing that the Americans did by having all these other different countries in their back pocket, because they're going to then make money through interest, right?
Road initiative, and that saved the global economy. Now, after China did this, China developed a lot of debt, okay? And China basically said to the world, listen, we saved the global economy, so we deserve a seat at the table, right? We deserve to be equals to America. And so we're gonna sell our products, our Huawei phones around the world. We're gonna compete with America for global dominance. America said, screw you, okay? Not that, of course, to Donald Trump, 2016, Donald Trump. And the first thing Donald Trump did, of course, was initiate the US-China trade war, right? China wants to be equal to America. America says, nope, screw you, we're gonna destroy you, okay? So America tried to sanction China. America tried to blockade China, okay? So we'll discuss this again later on throughout the semester, okay? Then what happened, of course, is 2022, Russia invades Ukraine, okay? So what Russia is saying is, you know this price hierarchy? Screw this, okay? Because guess what happens, guys? If you don't have any resources, this system doesn't work, okay? Try manufacturing without any resources. Try having knowledge without resources. Try having finance without resources, okay? So when Russia invades Ukraine, it's trying to control the resources of Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine together controls 1/3 of the world's carbohydrates. Africa, the Middle East starves to death without Russian and Ukrainian grain, okay? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but it's stupid, because a lot of countries in Africa can sustain themselves without needing imports, okay? There's a lot of countries, especially the main country that I can speak of personally is the Congo. The Congo's land is so fertile, bro. You can eat fruit and just throw it on the ground and you come back 2 weeks later and the fruit is starting to sprout. So if they wanted to grow grain, they could grow grain. They can grow anything they wanted. They have a port there. If they wanted to import, if they want to do fishing, they could have a lot of fish running around in the country. So by being someone who's lived in the Congo for a time, the country can be completely self-sufficient. Whether it's gems and minerals, oils, food, grain, all these different sort of resources that they think they need imported, They don't. They've just been corrupted to believe so and given these backstreet deals that says, oh, if you let our country import these things into your country, then blah, blah, we can cut your country a deal. But a lot of the politicians and rule makers in the Congo are very corrupt. And so this is why it stops them from being able to think outside of the box and realize that, yo, we don't actually need a handout. We can survive eternally on our own.
So now this entire system is in jeopardy, okay? And so what's happening today is America is fighting to save its game. It's trying to fight to save the system. It's trying to fight to save the US dollar. It's trying to fight to save its hegemony, okay? And Russia and China are trying to exert themselves. So we are in a time of game reset. And now this is the world that we live in today. Okay? All right. So we will discuss this throughout the semester. Any questions? Are you guys clear? So I know this was a lot to take in, but we'll go just to the specifics throughout the semester. Okay? We'll go and we'll apply the current events to explain why this is happening. Any questions?
So the only purpose of America, like they produce a service for China is to let them use US dollars, right? So America can use this game to everyone. But I think China does not do the same thing as America. Like they created this game. Why?
We'll discuss this throughout the semester, okay? The relationship between China and the United States. So remember that the United States wants China to play this game, but they can't really say to the world, oh, we're doing this because we're greedy and we want China to be subservient to us, okay? So they said that
they can't say it, but that is the game that they are playing. America wants to be number one. America wants to dominate over the world. But slowly over these last couple of years, we are watching the Western civilization completely degrade. Western civilization is one of those civilizations, especially today, where you want to make as much money as possible, and then you want to leave. You need to leave and go somewhere else and go and dump your money and invest in another country, okay? You don't want to stay here because due to the hubris, America is I think in the next couple of years, in the next 5 to 6 years, America will no longer be number one, all right? I hate to say it, but unfortunately, Canada, where I'm at too, we are definitely all in the same boat.